to have a complex design. For example, you can bring qualitative data into the framework of an experiment, intervention trial. Right here in the center, you see the experiment. And then you can gather qualitative data before the experiment in order to develop a good experimental set of conditions or to recruit participants. Or you can bring in qualitative data while the experiment is running, the convergent core design. Or bring in qualitative data after the experiment to actually follow up, because we know in a good experiment, we find out whether the treatment works, and we have some statistical values, p-values, confidence intervals, but we don't know why it worked, so we can follow up qualitatively. So one popular complex design is to bring qualitative core designs into the framework of an intervention trial. And this is a picture of my wife's study in Japan, where she had 4 phases. She brought qualitative data in before, right here, to explore and to build an intervention. And then she followed up an intervention with qualitative data to understand those intervention results. And then she redesigned a final intervention trial. So this is a big project, but it uses multiple core designs that are embedded within an overall intervention study. We can also embed qualitative data into the evaluation. Let's say we want to evaluate a project. And there are steps or stages in our evaluation: a needs assessment, theory, developing instruments, testing them out, following up. But you see right here, this is really embedding an exploratory sequential design into the steps of a program evaluation. And right here, this is embedding an explanatory sequential design in the steps of evaluation. So this is an example of a complex design. We're embedding the core designs in the steps or stages of an evaluation project. So in time, we began thinking about how to decide what type of mixed method design you have. And I developed this flow chart. First, are you collecting both quantitative and qualitative data? If the answer is no, you don't have a mixed method study. But if the answer is yes, now the question is, how are you going to bring the two databases together? Are you going to merge them or connect the data? If you don't plan on bringing the two databases together, you really don't have a mixed method study, because mixed method study is based upon the integration of the databases. If your answer is yes, then are you going to be merging, actually trying to put the two databases together, merge them? The answer is yes, you have a convergent design. If you're going to connect the two databases, one following the other, one building on the other, and qualitative is first, now you have an exploratory sequential design. Is quantitative first? Now you have an explanatory sequential design. So following this, then, do you plan to use these core designs within some larger process or framework? And often in large funded projects covering many years, we do have a complex design. If you're not bringing it into larger process framework, you're dealing with one or more of these core designs. But if you are, now what is the framework or process that you're using the core design in? Is it an experiment, intervention trial, case study, participatory action research project, evaluation, network analysis. There's a lot of possibilities. What's happening in the mixed methods world is that mixed methods is no longer seen as just a single standalone methodology, but it's being used in many different other frameworks and processes. So it's expanding its use because it can be used embedded within these larger frameworks. And then how are you actually embedding it? So this is a flow chart that I would work with you on to identify what your core design would be, and possibly if you're going to do a complex study, what that might be. The next thing I would have you do is draw a picture of your design. These started almost 15 years ago in the mixed methods field. At the National Institute of Health, people were interested in mixed methods, but they said the projects are so complex, John, that I can't understand what's going on. So at that point, we started thinking about, well, how do we design the procedures for mixed methods research? So if you have one of the core designs, remember there were three basic types: convergent, explanatory sequential, exploratory sequential. Well, here's how I would help you draw a diagram of your design. I would say get a piece of paper, or you could do this on your computer, and put a box in for quantitative and qualitative. Put some bullets in, these little bullets on data collection, data analysis. Put those into your diagram. We're going to bring these two databases together. This is for a convergent design diagram. So we need some arrows where we're merging the two databases. Now, I mentioned earlier we have quantitative, qualitative, and mixed methods questions. So what we can do is or aims, we can put the aims right above the boxes where they belong. A qualitative aim, a quantitative aim, a mixed methods aim. We can give this a title, the topic plus the type of design, convergent mixed methods design. We can also put a timeline in on this drawing. This is very helpful, especially for graduate students that now can indicate to their committee members and advisor when they plan to finish the project. I know the timeline may change as you go through your project, but still you can put a timeline in on this. That's how you draw a diagram. I would have you draw a diagram for convergent design, if that's the design that you've chosen to use. You're going to merge the two databases. If you have an explanatory sequential design, well, again, start with the two databases. And what you're going to do is connect the two databases. So qualitative builds on what you learned quantitatively, you get more detail. And then you need to make an interpretation or explanation. Again, we can organize our aims to fit these phases. Quantitative aim, aim 1, a qualitative aim, and aim 2, mixed methods aim, and aim 3. We can give it a title, your topic plus explanatory sequential design. And we can also, again, give it a timeline for how we're going to be doing this study. So that's how I would begin to have you draw out your procedures for your core designs. What about if you plan to have a complex design, like embedding these core designs within an experiment or a community participatory research study? Well, this is a recent idea in the last few years that I think people have found very helpful. I would suggest that you think of this as a two-stage process. First of all, what are the steps that you're going to be using in this framework or this process? And this is drawn from a book by Ivankova in 2015, where she's reporting a project actually in nursing care for older patients. And she's listing in these boxes, as you can see right here, these different boxes, the steps in doing her participatory study. She's first going to diagnose the environment, do a reconnaissance, then do, a planning, and actually starting to implement and evaluate her project and monitor the changes. These are fairly common steps in a community-based participatory research study. So listing out those steps. Then the second step in this is to identify where you have the opportunity to collect both quantitative and qualitative data. And here's this box on reconnaissance where they're collecting both forms of data. And now, how are they collecting both forms of data? Merging the two databases, having one build on the other, you can specify the core design. Here's another place in this complex design where they're collecting quantitative and qualitative data. Again, what's the core design? So this has been very useful for us to think about drawing a diagram of a complex design. First, list the steps, and then indicate in those steps where you're collecting both forms of data and what type of core designs. So in one of my recent articles, I even suggested, okay, if you have a complex design, you have two diagrams. One that indicates this and where the core designs fit in, and the second one on your core design. Now let's get to this area of mixed methods data analysis, which has been a very confusing area for many people. And I would say in the last 2 to 3 years in our workshops at Michigan, we've begun to work out how do you do mixed methods data analysis. And really mixed methods data analysis is the integration analysis, the integration of the two databases. So I put together this little chart that's helpful. And I also need to say that when I think about data analysis, whether it's quantitative or qualitative or mixed methods, I think in terms of the steps I'm going to use. Certainly the first step is to analyze both databases. I need to analyze my quantitative database and my qualitative. And then step 2 is integration of the two databases in my design, in my particular design. How am I going to integrate? So that flow chart, am I going to merge the data? I'm going to connect the data. What comes first, quantitative or qualitative? I'm going to integrate. Now, once I know how I'm going to integrate, I need to come up with a table or a figure to show that integration, represent the two databases of integration in a table or figure. Here's the term, a joint display. We're going to create a joint display. That's the most popular way to represent the data analysis of integration. And then from that joint display, we're then going to draw conclusions, insights, inferences, really on what the integration adds to our project beyond what we learned quantitatively or qualitatively. What new insight do we get from actually bringing the two databases together? So this integration is really merging the two databases, a convergent design. Connecting the databases, explanatory or exploratory sequential design. Embedding core designs into a framework or process, complex design. So some writers talk about all different kinds of integration. For me, it's very simple. There are 3 major ways that I see integration occurring. And we can actually go into our design. So this is a design of a convergent project, Convergent Mixed Methods project, where we collect quantitative and qualitative data and we analyze it. And then we're going to compare the databases. So integration occurs right here, where we begin bringing the two databases side by side for comparison. So next, a joint display. What we want to do is we want to display that integration. We know in a research study, we have tables and figures for both quantitative results and qualitative results. So now let's put together a figure or a diagram for our integration results. Joint display is a table or graph that portrays both the quantitative and qualitative data so they can be easily compared. It's really a central feature in doing good mixed methods research. And we see joint displays being published in leading mixed methods articles today. Well, for a convergent design, where we're just merging the two databases and looking across the two databases, when we ask people to fill out the survey and we also do some focus group interviews with them, do those two databases, how do they compare? Well, we might come up with some themes from our qualitative data analysis. And we might come up with some scores, high, medium, and low scores for our quantitative data. And what we can do here is put quotes or numbers in these cells. And we can ask ourselves, well, for the people that scored high, how were their perceptions different on these four themes, or were they similar? So we can look across a row, or we can look down a column. How did the high, medium, and low scoring people differ in terms of how they talked about theme one? And we can look down the column here. So this table gives us the opportunity to actually look across the two databases and draw some insights. Let me talk just for a moment about how I would draw out this diagram, this joint display. First of all, I would ask you to put, if you're in my office and we're talking about your project, let's come up with an example of what your joint display might look like. Let's first draw a box like this. And if you're going to do exploratory sequential design, remember that's qualitative, followed by designing or modifying a quantitative instrument, followed by testing out that instrument. So let's put 3 columns in here. And also we want to look for insight. So we're going to look for our inferences across this. So phase 1, we're going to order these columns in terms of the phases. Phase 1 is qualitative. I'm bringing in a Hawaiian leadership project here. Phase 2 is then to redesign a survey instrument. Phase 3 is to actually administer that redesigned instrument to test it out, and then to draw some conclusions from what we learned from our integration. And so I'm then going to put in some hypothetical sample data at each one of the columns. Here were the themes I came up with after I gathered my focus groups. Here were some of the quantitative results from a survey instrument that I administered. This is a modified instrument. And then when I actually tested out the instrument, here were some of the quantitative results. And then the insights, looking across the row here. What are the practice research insights? What are the research insights, etc.? So that's kind of how I would draw a sample joint display. Now, once we have the joint display, we need to look across the databases and draw some conclusions about what we learned from this integration. This is called inferences or meta inferences. It's called meta because we have quantitative inferences and qualitative inferences